So you want to learn to speak French. Maybe you want to be able to order your coffee on the streets of Paris, or maybe you want to be able to take wine tasting classes in Bordeaux in French. Or maybe perhaps you want to read classical literature in French, or maybe you want to watch French movies or learn the language for a significant other. As an intermediate French language learner, I've picked up some free online resources for learning French, and over the past sort of hour and a half, I've sat down to set up a 3-stage framework for learning the language up to an upper intermediate level, only using free online resources. My framework is built up of 3 different distinct stages that are designed to take you from, never having studied the language before all the way through to an upper intermediate language learner. It's really easy to get lost while learning languages, especially just by yourself, as there's lots of information online and lots of different resources you can pick from. And often we feel as if maybe the language resources that we're using aren't the best ones, or maybe there's a different approach we could use elsewhere. We sometimes pick resources and then drop them, and only to pick up a new resource only for someone else to tell us it's not the right one to use. And that has really inspired me to create the language learning framework that I'm about to present to you today. So step 1 of my framework is designed to get you familiar with French, and also this stage is designed to really not get you bogged down into the grammar and vocabulary and the nitty-gritty, but to really make you also use the language and appreciate the language for what it is as well, just so that you don't lose track of what you're trying to achieve. And this is where I would recommend using an audio course. Now, the reason why I love audio courses so much, especially for beginner learners, is that it's sort of not very cumbersome to get started. All you need is your phone and an app and some earphones, and you can start learning the language straight away without sort of getting bogged down into textbooks or hours and hours and hours of video content. And when I was in Germany, I used the language transfer app to learn German. And over the first sort of 10 lessons, I really started to get a grasp of how some of the fundamentals in the language work. And the next day I was able to speak some basic German while living in Germany. And so that was pretty cool. But you're trying to learn French here, and luckily the app also has an introductory French course. And after having a wee look at it, I saw that it could be really valuable for a beginner language learner, as it really breaks down all the different steps in speaking the language, and it follows the format of sort of like a language teacher and a student, and you follow along the lesson with the student and the teacher, and you make the same mistakes as the student and you improve alongside the student in the different scenarios. I found that the app does a fantastic job of introducing grammar really early on, but in really easy steps, and they really break it down really well, so that again, you're not sort of sitting, slogging through hours and hours and hours of worksheets, but you're starting to speak straight away, and the grammar is really well explained. Now, in this first stage, I'm also a firm believer in using the language straight away, as if you're only trying to learn the language, it can, make you feel discouraged, as you're not really, using it, and you're not really staying as engaged as I think you should be. So I also recommend maybe, listening to French music at this stage, or even watching French films with French subtitles, or really whatever it is you're into, just to sort of, not lose the light at the end of the tunnel, and to really get you excited about learning the language. Okay, so now we're approaching the second phase, where at the end of the first phase, you went through the introductory French language course on language transfer, or maybe, a different audio course app of your choosing, and maybe you've gotten halfway through that, and you've also paired it with Duolingo, and you're, being able to introduce yourself, you're starting to form basic sentences, and you're feeling quite confident in getting the basics down. So, you can introduce yourself, maybe talk about your pets here and there, and you sort of, you're forming your own sentences. We're not quite at that A2 maybe level yet. I think that this is the perfect phase where you should, sit down and really, go through some online videos, or maybe some online grammar worksheets, where you really start to, sort of sit down to learn the language. The first phase was, all about using free apps on your phone, or maybe listening to music and doing quite easy things where you can start to build momentum. Whereas, in the second phase, we're moving to sort of sitting down and doing some focused study. In this phase, I recommend using some grammar and some vocabulary resources online for free. And I think that a great way to start is to use some French language learning YouTube and YouTubers, such as, for example, Learn French with Alexa and Français avec Pierre. These YouTube channels are great as they introduce concepts in nice and digestible videos. and they have playlists on their channels which range from sort of elementary learners up to intermediate and higher. I personally find Learn French with Alexa's YouTube videos on grammar particularly helpful, as she breaks it down in nice and digestible concepts, and she also has some questions for us to answer and to have a think about ourselves in the videos. I also recommend pairing that with some language learning worksheets, as of course we don't want to just use one resource, and we really want to make sure we have a holistic language learning strategy. And I really recommend you to do some online worksheets and maybe some vocabulary practice. And for this, I really recommend Lawless French. It's a website, it has lots of different resources for learning the language. It breaks it down by level, and it also breaks down the sort of different language learning skills where you can focus to sit down and do grammar, or focus down the chronological order of the different lessons. I find it quite cool that the website breaks things down into different skills, like I already said, and you can really hunker down that pronunciation or that grammar or whatever it is that you're struggling with at this stage. So this website is good to consolidate what you already know and to develop the skills that you might be lacking in this stage. Okay, so now we're still in phase 2, where we finished the language transfer audio course, we've done some Duolingo, and we've learned some French using these online YouTube resources, and we've done some worksheets and some practice on the Lawless French website. Now at this stage, I really recommend starting to speak the language with other people, as this is sort of like the number one reason most people learn languages, I would say, and it can be really helpful to make you feel as if you're making progress and actually using the language. As you know, consuming YouTube and consuming films and music in French is really useful, but where is that going to get you if you can't actually speak to people? And in this stage, many people recommend getting a language tutor or going on an expensive trip or holiday to France or a different French speaking country. Not everyone can do that, and sometimes you want to do it at your own pace and not sort of get flown into a foreign country. And at this stage, I really recommend going onto some language learning Discord servers where you can meet other language learners and maybe speak to French native speakers, and also maybe using online forums and Discord servers to really start speaking the language. And I think that this method is extremely useful, as it allows to use the language for what 99% of people learn a language for, and it also helps you see your progress and to see that you're actually finally starting to use the language. Okay, and finally we reach that third phase of language learning, where you've spoken French online, you've been using the language, you finished the language transfer course, and you've done all of the different worksheets available on the Lawless French website. At this point, I really recommend you to take the Étudier en France intermediate course, which is offered by a well-known French university on Coursera. And this course is recommended to students that want to come to France and study in French, and it takes you from a B1 level up to the B2 level, which is required to study in a French language university. I think that this is the perfect final resource that I can recommend, as it takes you from a lower intermediate up to an upper intermediate language learner level. And at this point, you can, really start to use the language and not really worry about using online resources. And at this point, you should be fairly proficient in the language after you finish this course. So yeah, there you are, folks. That's my 3 different stages of being a beginner language learner, which takes you all the way up to the upper intermediate level. I wish you all the best of luck in your language learning journey, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.